Cowboy adopted a lost Apache girl. She turned out to be the gorgeous daughter of an Apache widow. It was a quiet morning on the edge of the small frontier settlement. The sun had just begun to rise, casting long golden streaks across the fields and hills. The air smelled fresh from the night rain, and the soft wind rustled the leaves of the trees that surrounded the cowboy's small cabin. This cabin had stood alone for many years, far from the nearest town, and it was here that a solitary cowboy lived. His life was simple, filled with work on the land, caring for his few horses, and the endless chores of frontier living. Though life was often lonely, he had learned to accept the solitude, finding comfort in the quiet and the open sky. That morning, the cowboy saddled his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare he had raised from a foal. He had planned to ride into the nearby woods to check some traps he had set for rabbits and to see if any wild game had come near the edges of the forest. As he rode slowly, the forest seemed alive with sound, the chirping of birds, the distant rustle of animals moving through the underbrush, and the faint whisper of wind through the tall pines. The cowboy enjoyed these rides. They gave him time to think, time to be with his own thoughts, and time to feel connected to the land he called home. As he moved deeper into the woods, he noticed something unusual. There, near the edge of a small clearing, he saw movement. At first he thought it might be a deer or a fox, but then he heard a soft, frightened cry. The sound was human, small and weak. He stopped his horse and listened carefully. The cry came again, a trembling, almost pitiful sound. His heart stirred. Without hesitation, he guided his horse toward the sound, moving quietly among the trees. Through the branches he saw her. A young girl, not more than 7 or 8 years old, crouched on the ground, her knees pulled close to her chest. She was thin and dirty, her hair tangled and matted with leaves. Her eyes were wide and fearful, glancing in every direction as if expecting danger at any moment. She was alone. No one else was in sight. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the fallen leaves. He spoke gently, not wanting to scare her further. "Hey there, little one, it's okay. You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. The girl looked up, startled, but didn't move. She shook her head slightly, as if warning him to stay away. The cowboy noticed she had a small blanket wrapped around her shoulders, torn and muddy from the wet ground. Her eyes were dark and wary, but he could see the fear behind them, the kind of fear only a lost child could feel. He took a careful step closer, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you." "My name is Jack," he said, offering a small smile. "Do you need help?" She was hesitant at first, and her fingers trembled as she held his. Step by step, he guided her out of the woods, back toward his cabin. The ride on horseback was slow, with the girl sitting carefully in front of him. She didn't speak, and he didn't push her. He simply rode steadily, letting her adjust to his presence and the strange situation. When they reached the cabin, he led her inside. The small house smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs, simple but clean. He set a warm blanket on the floor and sat her down. "There. You can rest here for a bit," he said, fetching a cup of warm water and a small piece of bread. The girl hesitated, then took the bread slowly, nibbling at it as though afraid it might disappear. He watched her closely, understanding that trust could not be rushed. Over the next few days, Jack worked quietly to make the girl feel safe. He gave her a bath in warm water, gently washing the dirt and grime from her small body. She was shy and would flinch at sudden movements, but slowly she began to relax. He found some clean clothes that had belonged to his younger days and dressed her in them. Though they were a little large, they would keep her warm and dry. The girl, who Jack had come to call Little Morning Star because of her bright, watchful eyes, began to show small signs of personality, smiling faintly when he told stories, laughing softly at his jokes, and even helping him gather firewood. Life was not easy for the cowboy and Morning Star. The woods could be dangerous, and they had to be careful with the wild animals that roamed nearby. But Jack taught her the skills she needed to survive. He showed her how to watch for tracks in the mud, how to gather edible plants, and how to stay quiet when riding through the forest. Morning Star was a quick learner, and Jack admired her courage and intelligence. He could see that despite her small frame and tender age, she had a strength that would carry her through many challenges. Neighbors soon began to notice the change in Jack's life. Some whispered about the strange pair, a man alone in the woods with a Native American child. They wondered where the girl had come from, why Jack had taken her in, and whether this would bring trouble. Jack ignored their questions. He knew that what mattered was keeping Morning Star safe, not pleasing the judgment of others. As the weeks passed, Morning Star grew more confident. She explored the woods near the cabin with Jack, learning to climb small hills, follow streams, and recognize the sounds of birds and animals. Jack taught her to ride his horse, guiding her patiently until she could manage small rides on her own. Though she still had moments of fear, especially at night, the presence of Jack made her feel protected. At the same time, Jack found his own life transformed. He laughed more, felt a sense of purpose he had never known, and discovered the deep satisfaction of helping someone who truly depended on him. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack and Morning Star sat by the fire. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows, but inside the cabin, the warmth and light offered comfort. Jack looked at her and saw not a frightened child, but a young girl beginning to trust the world again. He realized how much he had come to care for her, not just as someone he had rescued, but as someone who had changed his life forever. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't think I'd ever have a family, not really. But somehow, having you here, it feels right." But with Morning Star by his side, Jack found joy and hope he had never known. He knew the path ahead might be difficult, and he worried about the girl's past and what might come from it. Yet, for the first time in many years, he felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. As the days turned into weeks, Jack and Morning Star developed routines that made life predictable and safe. Jack would rise early, tending to the animals and chores, while Morning Star helped as much as she could. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories of the past and dreams for the future. Jack told her about the wide world beyond the woods, about towns and rivers, about people who lived very differently. Morning Star listened eagerly, her imagination painting pictures of a life she had never known. Though her past remained a mystery, Jack knew one thing: Morning Star was no longer alone. She had someone who cared for her, who would protect her from the dangers of the frontier, and who would teach her how to live with strength and courage. And slowly, in the quiet moments, he realized that in saving her, he had also found a part of himself he had long thought lost. The forest outside remained wild and untamed, the world beyond uncertain and full of challenges. But inside the small cabin, a young girl and a cowboy had found a bond that promised safety, growth, and the beginning of something extraordinary. It was a story that would change both their lives forever, a story of trust, courage, and the unexpected ways in which life could bring two very different people together. And so, the cowboy and the lost Apache girl began their life together, each day filled with small lessons, quiet joys, and the growing understanding that family could be found in the most unexpected places. Though the journey ahead was unknown, the bond they shared gave them both strength, hope, and a sense of belonging neither had felt before. The weeks and months passed quickly in the quiet life of the cowboy and Morning Star. The days were filled with work, learning, and small adventures, but they were never boring. Every morning the sun rose over the hills, casting its golden light across the land, and the two would begin their daily routine. Jack, the cowboy, would tend to his horses and check the traps he had set, while Morning Star helped gather water, chop firewood, and feed the animals. Though she was still small, her determination and willingness to help impressed Jack every day. As she grew stronger, Jack began to teach her new skills. He showed her how to ride the horses properly, starting with small rides around the clearing near the cabin. At first, Morning Star was nervous, gripping the reins tightly and holding on to Jack as he led the horse. But soon, she found her balance and learned to guide the horse with gentle nudges and shifts of her weight. Jack watched her closely, offering encouragement whenever she faltered. "That's it," he would say. "You've got it, just trust yourself." And she did. With each ride, her confidence grew and Jack felt proud of her progress. Hunting was another important skill. The frontier was beautiful, but it could be dangerous for someone who didn't know the land. Jack taught Morningstar how to track animals by following footprints in the mud and broken branches on the ground. He showed her how to recognize bird calls and the rustle of small animals in the brush. At first, she struggled to notice the small signs, but Jack was patient. He would whisper tips to her, and slowly she began to understand. By the end of several weeks, she could quietly follow a rabbit or a deer without startling it, a skill that made Jack smile with pride. While Morningstar learned practical skills, Jack also taught her about life in the wider world. He told her stories of people he had met in the nearby towns, of traders and settlers, and of travelers who had crossed the frontier. Morningstar listened eagerly, her eyes wide with wonder. She asked countless questions, and Jack answered patiently, telling her about the ways people lived, the dangers they faced, and the small joys they found. He wanted her to understand that while the world could be harsh, it could also be beautiful and full of opportunities. Evenings were their favorite time. After a long day of work, they would sit by the fire in the cabin. Jack would play his old guitar, singing soft tunes that he had learned as a boy. Morningstar loved the music, and sometimes she would hum along or tap her fingers to the rhythm. On quiet nights, Jack would tell stories from his own childhood, about adventures he had taken and mistakes he had made. Morningstar would listen with rapt attention, laughing at the funny parts and leaning close when he spoke of serious moments. These evenings brought them closer, strengthening the bond that had begun when Jack first found her in the forest. Despite the peaceful life they shared, the world outside remained unpredictable. Occasionally, travelers passed by, bringing news of the wider territory or warnings of dangers. Some were friendly, offering help or supplies, while others were suspicious, wary of strangers. Jack had to be careful, both for his safety and for Morningstar's. He did not want anyone to know too much about her, fearing that word might reach the wrong people or stir old conflicts. Morningstar sensed some of this tension and would often ask questions about the people they saw. Jack answered as honestly as he could without alarming her, teaching her to be cautious but not fearful. One day, as they rode through the forest, Jack decided it was time to teach Morningstar how to fish. They came to a small stream that wound its way through the trees, the water sparkling in the sunlight. Jack showed her how to hold the fishing rod, how to cast the line, and how to wait patiently for a bite. Morningstar was quick to learn, and soon she had caught her first fish. She was so proud that she almost dropped it, holding it tightly as Jack smiled at her excitement. "Good job," he said. "You've got the patience of a real woodswoman." Morningstar laughed, a bright sound that made Jack feel happier than he had in years. As the days passed, Morningstar began to show her personality more clearly. She was curious, playful, and quick to learn. She loved exploring the woods, climbing trees, and watching the animals. Jack admired her resilience. Despite the fear and uncertainty of her early days, she faced each new challenge with courage. She asked questions about the world, about the stars, about the animals, and Jack answered each one patiently. Sometimes he had to admit he didn't know, but he encouraged her to explore and find out for herself. He wanted her to grow strong and independent, capable of making her own decisions. Jack also noticed that Morningstar had a natural kindness toward others. She would leave food for small animals, speak softly to the birds, and help any injured creature she found. Jack often told her, "The world is tough, but kindness makes it better." Never forget that. Morningstar took his words to heart, and her compassion grew alongside her strength. Life was not without its small dangers. One afternoon, a wild coyote approached their cabin, eyeing the chickens in the pen. Morningstar froze, unsure what to do. Jack acted quickly, shouting and waving his arms to scare the coyote away. Later, he explained to her why they had to be careful and how to respond in such situations. "You must always respect the animals," he said, "but you also need to protect yourself and what belongs to you." Morning Star listened carefully, storing the lesson for the future. Jack also noticed how quickly Morning Star adapted to the changing seasons. Winter brought snow and harsh winds, but she learned to help gather firewood, prepare food, and keep warm. Spring brought new life to the land, with flowers blooming and animals giving birth. Morning Star loved watching the world awaken around her, and Jack enjoyed seeing her delight in the small miracles of nature. He often thought that despite all the hardships she had faced, she had a spirit that could not be broken. As they worked and learned together, the bond between Jack and Morning Star deepened. He began to think of her not just as a child he had rescued, but as someone who had become part of his life in a way that was irreplaceable. She looked up to him for guidance, and he felt responsible for her safety and happiness. There were quiet moments when he would watch her sleep, thinking about how far she had come, and he would feel a mixture of pride and protectiveness. One evening, after a long day of work in the woods, they sat by the fire together. Morning Star leaned against Jack, tired but happy. "Do you think I'll ever see my family again?" she asked softly, her voice full of hope and uncertainty. Jack paused, unsure how to answer. He didn't know the truth of her past, but he wanted to give her comfort. "I don't know," he said gently, "but whatever happens, I'll be here for you. You're not alone anymore." Jack's presence had become her anchor in a world that had once seemed full of danger and loneliness. She began to trust that, no matter what, she had a place where she belonged. As the seasons changed, Jack and Morning Star faced new challenges and small adventures. They encountered storms that flooded the streams, forcing them to work together to protect their cabin and animals. They met travelers who sometimes brought gifts, sometimes warnings, and always new stories. Each challenge brought them closer, teaching them to rely on each other and to face difficulties with courage and patience. Jack often reflected on how much Morning Star had changed his life. He had been alone for many years, content with his quiet existence, but now he felt a warmth and joy he had never known. Her laughter, her curiosity, and her courage had brought life to his lonely days. And Morning Star, in turn, had grown from a frightened, lost child into a confident, capable young girl, ready to face the world with strength and kindness. Their life together was far from perfect, but it was filled with meaning. Jack knew that there would be more challenges ahead, that the world beyond the woods was unpredictable and sometimes harsh. But he also knew that as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came their way. Morning Star had become more than just a child he had rescued. She was family, a part of his heart, and a reminder that even in the toughest places, kindness and love could create a home. And so, each day in the forest brought new lessons, new joys, and new stories. Jack and Morning Star continued to grow together, learning from the land, from each other, and from the small wonders of life around them. Their bond became unbreakable, a source of strength, comfort, and hope for both of them. Though they did not yet know what the future held, one thing was certain. They had found something rare and precious in each other, a connection that would guide them through every challenge and adventure to come. The seasons had changed once again, and the frontier was alive with the colors of late summer. The sun was warm but not harsh, and the air carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. Jack and Morning Star had grown used to their routine, but their life together was about to change in a way neither of them could have imagined. One morning, as Jack rode into the nearby settlement to gather supplies, he overheard a conversation at the general store. Two women were speaking in low, anxious voices about a widow who had been searching for her missing daughter for many years. Her daughter had been lost during a raid when she was very young, and the widow had never stopped looking. Jack's heart tightened. He had thought about Morning Star's past often, wondering where she had come from and whether she had any family still alive. He decided to listen more closely, careful not to draw attention. The girl is said to have disappeared near the forest edge, one woman said. The widow has searched everywhere, but there's no sign of her. It's been nearly 10 years. He quietly purchased the supplies he needed and rode back home, his mind full of questions. When he returned, Morning Star was waiting by the cabin, picking flowers near the edge of the clearing. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, her bright eyes shining with curiosity. Jack dismounted and approached her slowly, unsure how to explain what he had heard. "Morning Star," he said gently, "there's something I need to talk to you about. I think we should try to find out if this girl might be you. But we owe it to you to find out. If it's true, you might have a family who loves you and has been waiting all these years." He described Morning Star carefully, asking if anyone had seen a child matching her description. Some people were unsure, while others remembered hearing stories of a little girl lost long ago. Jack also wanted to protect Morning Star from disappointment. He didn't want her hopes to be raised too quickly, only to be broken. Meanwhile, Morning Star could not stop thinking about the possibility of her mother. At night, she would sit by the fire, staring into the flames and imagining what it would be like to meet her. She pictured a kind woman with gentle eyes, a warm smile, and stories about the world beyond the forest. The thought of finally knowing her past filled her with hope and fear at the same time. She had grown up with Jack, and he was the only family she had ever known, but the idea of a mother waiting for her made her heart ache with longing. Finally, after days of careful inquiry, Jack discovered a clue. A traveling trader remembered visiting the widow's home several years ago. He recalled seeing a small child who had been lost, and he described the widow's desperate search. Jack wrote down the information and began planning a careful approach. He wanted to meet the widow himself, to see if Morning Star truly was her daughter, before revealing anything to the girl. One bright morning, Jack led Morning Star to the edge of the settlement where the widow lived. The woman's home was small but well kept, with a garden full of herbs and flowers. As they approached, Jack could see the widow through the window tending to her plants. She looked older than her years, with lines of worry on her face, but there was also a quiet strength in her posture. Jack knocked gently on the door. The widow opened it and her eyes widened as she saw him. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. Jack introduced himself and explained that he had found a young girl in the forest, a girl who might match the description of her missing daughter. The widow's hands trembled as she listened. She invited them inside, and Jack spoke carefully, telling her about Morning Star's background, her arrival in the forest, and the bond they had shared. All the while, Morning Star stood quietly, unsure what to expect. Then the widow asked to see the girl. Morning Star stepped forward slowly. The widow's eyes filled with tears as she took in the sight of her child standing before her. She knelt down, reaching out, and Morning Star hesitated for a moment before stepping into her arms. "Is it really you?" the widow whispered, her voice breaking. Morning Star nodded, tears spilling from her eyes. I think so," she said softly. The next hours were filled with questions, stories, and shared memories. The widow asked about her early childhood, about small details only a mother would know. Morning Star remembered bits and pieces, the sound of her mother singing, the feel of her hand guiding her, the warmth of a home she had long forgotten. Each memory confirmed what they both feared and hoped. They were truly mother and daughter. Jack watched from a distance, his heart full of pride and emotion. He had grown to love Morning Star as his own child, but he knew this reunion was what she had needed all along. Though it was difficult to imagine life without her at his side, he understood that family sometimes meant letting go. Over the next few days, Morning Star spent time with her mother, learning about the life she had lost. The widow told her stories of her family, of the years she had spent searching, and of the love that had never faded. Morning Star listened eagerly, absorbing each word. She was amazed by the strength and courage her mother had shown, and she felt a deep connection to this woman who had never stopped hoping to find her. Jack continued to visit them, helping with chores and sharing meals, but he gave Morning Star space to bond with her mother. He watched as she laughed freely, played in the garden, and shared secrets with the woman who had given her life. Though it was bittersweet, Jack knew that Morning Star was finally where she belonged. The reunion also brought new challenges. Morning Star had grown used to the life she shared with Jack, the routines, the lessons, the adventures. Now she had to adjust to a new home, new expectations, and a mother she barely remembered. She struggled at first, unsure how to balance her love for Jack with her growing attachment to her mother. But the widow was patient, understanding that Morning Star had a life of her own and needed time to adjust. Jack, too, faced his own struggles. He missed the quiet days with Morning Star, the companionship and the bond they had built. But he found comfort in knowing that she was safe, loved, and happy. He realized that his role in her life had been important, that he had prepared her to face the world with courage and confidence. And in that knowledge, he found peace. As weeks passed, Morning Star became a bridge between the two worlds she had known. She spent her mornings with her mother, learning about her heritage, cooking, and tending to the garden. In the afternoons, she would ride with Jack, explore the forest, and continue practicing the skills he had taught her. She began to understand that both parts of her life were important, and that love could exist in many forms. The widow often expressed her gratitude to Jack. She knew that without his care, her daughter might never have survived, or might have grown up fearful and alone. She thanked him repeatedly, insisting that he visit whenever he could. Jack accepted, knowing that he would always be part of their lives, even if Morning Star now had her mother. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Jack, Morning Star, and her mother sat together on the porch. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the scent of wildflowers. Morning Star leaned against Jack, smiling at the woman who had given her life. The widow placed a hand on Morning Star's shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of the girl she had searched for so long. Jack looked at them and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found a purpose in life, had helped a child grow, and had witnessed a reunion that was nothing short of miraculous. Though life would continue to bring challenges, he knew that Morning Star was ready to face them with courage, love, and the lessons he had taught her. In the days that followed, the trio began building a new routine together. Jack continued to teach Morning Star survival skills and life lessons, while her mother guided her in understanding her heritage and family history. The girl thrived in this environment, growing stronger, wiser, and more confident with each passing day. The bond she shared with both Jack and her mother became unbreakable, a source of strength and comfort for all three. And so, the lost girl had been found, her family reunited, and her life transformed. Jack had played a crucial role in her journey, and though the story of their adventures together was far from over, this chapter marked the beginning of a new life, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The days following Morning Star's reunion with her mother were filled with laughter, learning, and the kind of quiet happiness that comes after long years of waiting. The widow, whose name was Yella, had spent almost a decade searching for her lost daughter, and now that she had found her, she could hardly believe it was real. Every morning she would wake and glance at Morning Star, amazed that this small, bright-eyed girl was truly hers. Each smile, each word, and each small act of kindness from her daughter felt like a miracle. Morning Star, too, was learning to adjust. She had grown up with Jack, learning the ways of the forest, riding horses, and surviving in the wilderness. Now she had to balance her love and respect for Jack with the new bond she shared with her mother. It was confusing at times. She had spent years thinking of Jack as her family, and now she had a mother she barely remembered but felt an immediate connection with. Still, Morning Star was resilient, and with time, she began to see that her heart could hold both love and gratitude for two people who cared deeply for her. Jack continued to visit regularly. Though he no longer lived with Morning Star full-time, he remained an important part of her life. He would bring supplies, share stories, and help with work around the widow's small home. He also spent time teaching Morning Star skills she would need as she grew older: how to track animals, care for the land, and handle unexpected dangers in the wild. Morning Star soaked up his lessons with eagerness, just as she had during their first months together in the forest. Jack knew that teaching her these skills was not just about survival. It was about giving her confidence, independence, and the knowledge that she could face life's challenges with courage. Ayala, for her part, was patient and kind. She wanted Morning Star to know about her heritage, the traditions of their family, and the strength of the people she came from. She told stories of her ancestors, taught her songs and simple crafts, and showed her how to tend the garden that provided food and herbs. Morning Star loved these moments, feeling a deep sense of belonging and pride. She began to understand that she was connected to something larger than herself, that her life had roots she could now explore and cherish. Despite the joy of reunion, there were challenges. Morning Star sometimes struggled with confusion and loyalty. She loved Jack dearly and missed the life they had shared, yet she also wanted to honor and embrace her mother. Jack and Ayala worked together to guide her through this, assuring her that it was okay to love both of them. "Your heart is big enough," Jack said one afternoon as they sat by the fire. "There's room for love in many ways, and you don't have to choose. You belong to both of us in different ways, and that's a good thing." Morning Star smiled, feeling comforted by their words. Over the following weeks, the small family began to settle into a new routine. Mornings were spent in the garden, tending plants and gathering herbs. Afternoons were spent exploring the surrounding woods, riding horses, and learning skills that Jack had taught her. Evenings were for stories, music, and quiet reflection. The bond between Jack, Morning Star, and Ayala grew stronger each day. They laughed together, helped each other, and shared the simple joys of life on the frontier. One day, a group of neighboring settlers came to visit. They had heard of Morning Star's return and were curious to meet her and Ayala. Jack accompanied them, feeling proud of how much the girl had grown. The neighbors were amazed at Morning Star's confidence and skills. She could ride horses, recognize animal tracks, and handle small chores with ease. They were impressed with her courage and resilience, qualities Jack had nurtured during the years they spent together. Morning Star beamed with pride, feeling that she had finally found a place where she belonged and where she was valued for who she was. Life was not always easy, however. The frontier had its dangers, and the family had to remain vigilant. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby stream, Morning Star spotted a wild animal, a fox trapped in a net left by hunters. She quickly ran to help it, using the skills Jack had taught her. With care, she freed the animal and guided it to safety. Jack and Ayala watched, impressed by her bravery and kindness. "You've grown into a remarkable young girl," Jack said quietly. Ayala nodded, tears in her eyes. "You carry both strength and compassion," she said. Morning Star smiled, feeling proud and loved. As time passed, the small family faced many small adventures together. They experienced sudden storms, wandered through dense forests, and even helped travelers who had lost their way. Each challenge brought them closer, teaching them to rely on one another and to face difficulties with courage and patience. Morning Star learned that family was not only about love, but also about supporting one another through hardships, and she embraced this lesson wholeheartedly. The bond between Jack and Ayala also deepened. They respected each other for the roles they had played in Morning Star's life. Jack had been her protector, teacher, and companion through years of uncertainty. Ayala had been the mother waiting patiently, never giving up hope. Together, they formed a circle of love and care around Morning Star, ensuring she felt safe, valued, and cherished. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, the three of them sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Morning Star leaned against Jack, feeling his steady presence, while Ayala held her other hand, offering comfort and warmth. The air was filled with the scent of wildflowers, and the gentle sound of birds returning to their nests added to the peaceful atmosphere. "I never imagined life could be this beautiful," Morning Star whispered. Jack smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "It's only the beginning," he said. Ella nodded, tears in her eyes. "And it will only get better," she added. The weeks turned into months, and Morning Star grew stronger, wiser, and more confident. She learned not only the skills Jack had taught her, but also the traditions, values, and wisdom her mother had to offer. She became a bridge between two worlds: the wild frontier she had grown up in, and the family and heritage she had been reunited with. She learned to ride horses with grace, tend the garden with patience, and navigate the forest with skill. She also learned about her roots, the stories of her people, and the love that had never faded despite years of separation. Jack watched with pride as Morning Star flourished. He had rescued her when she was lost and afraid, and now he saw her growing into a strong, confident young girl. He knew that his role in her life had been important, but he also recognized that her mother's love had been equally vital. Together, they had given Morning Star the tools, love, and guidance she needed to face the world with courage. Ella often expressed her gratitude to Jack. She knew that without him, her daughter might never have survived, or might have grown up fearful and alone. She thanked him repeatedly, insisting that he visit whenever he could. Jack accepted, knowing that he would always be part of their lives, even if Morning Star now had her mother. As the family settled into their new life, they began to dream about the future. Morning Star expressed a desire to explore the lands beyond the forest, to learn more about her heritage, and to continue developing the skills Jack had taught her. Jack encouraged her, proud of her curiosity and determination. Ayala supported her daughter's dreams, understanding that the world was vast and full of opportunities waiting to be discovered. Together, they faced challenges, celebrated successes, and grew stronger as a family. Morning Star became a symbol of hope and resilience for those around them, a child who had survived hardships, found her family, and thrived under love and care. Jack and Ayala took pride in her achievements, knowing that their guidance, protection, and love had shaped her into the remarkable girl she had become. One peaceful afternoon, the three of them sat by the river, skipping stones across the water. Morning Star laughed as a stone bounced across the surface, and Jack joined in, showing her how to make it skip further. Ayala watched with a smile, feeling a sense of completeness she had not known for years. In that moment, the past hardships seemed far away, replaced by the joy of being together, the warmth of family, and the simple pleasures of life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with rich colors, Morning Star reflected on her journey. She had been lost, frightened, and alone, but she had found love, safety, and belonging. She had grown stronger, learned skills that would guide her for the rest of her life, and discovered the true meaning of family. And through it all, Jack and her mother had been by her side, offering guidance, protection, and unwavering love. The story of the lost girl and the cowboy was one of courage, hope, and the power of human connection. It was a story that showed how love could transform lives, heal wounds, and create bonds that were stronger than any obstacle. Morning Star had been given a second chance, a life full of promise and possibilities, and she embraced it with a heart full of gratitude and joy. In the quiet moments, Jack and Ayala often shared a glance, recognizing the role they had played in shaping Morning Star's life. They had come from different worlds, brought together by fate and circumstance, and had created something extraordinary, a family built on trust, love, and mutual respect. And Morning Star, with her bright eyes and courageous spirit, had become the living proof of what love and care could achieve. The frontier remained wild and unpredictable, the world full of challenges, but the family was ready to face it together. Jack, Morning Star, and Ayala had found something rare and precious: love, trust, and a home. And as they sat together under the vast sky, the stars beginning to appear one by one, they knew that the future, whatever it held, would be bright, hopeful, and full of endless possibilities. Morning Star smiled, leaning against the two people who had given her life meaning. She had learned the value of courage, the strength of love, and the importance of family. And in that smile, Jack and Ayala saw the promise of a life filled with hope, adventure, and the kind of happiness that comes from being truly loved and protected. The lost girl had been found, and in the process, all of them had discovered something far greater: the enduring power of love, the beauty of trust, and the joy of family. Their story was not just one of reunion, but also of growth, transformation, and the remarkable journey that had brought them together. And as the night settled over the frontier, the three of them remained side by side, ready to face whatever adventures lay ahead, bound by a love that could never be broken.